The most common mistake we make when dealing with a difficult person is believing that they want to win the argument. We assume that if we provide enough evidence, if we show enough hurt, or if we strike back with enough force, the conflict will eventually reach a logical conclusion. But in the theater of human nature, logic is often a secondary character. There are those among us, individuals who carry a deep, unexamined void within their souls, who do not seek a resolution at all. They seek an echo. They seek a reflection of their own internal chaos, mirrored back to them through your emotional reaction. We call these individuals narcissists. But to see them clearly, we must look past the clinical label. They are, in essence, unconscious actors, driven by a profound and terrifying fear of insignificance. For them, your anger is a gift. Your tears are a confirmation of their existence. Even your hatred is a form of tribute, for it proves that they have the power to move the needle of your soul. Human society is a theater of masks, and the narcissist wears the most elaborate one of all. Beneath that mask, however, is not a monster of legend, but a fragmented psyche that cannot sustain its own sense of value without external validation. They live in a state of perpetual hunger, a psychological famine that requires them to consume the emotional energy of those around them. This is what we call emotional supply. It is the fuel for their persona. When you fight them, you are fueling them. When you defend yourself, you are validating their accusations. When you cry, you are nourishing their sense of dominance. The greatest paradox of these dynamics is that the only way to truly overcome the influence of such a person is not to fight harder, but to stop fighting altogether, to become, in effect, as uninteresting and unresponsive as a gray rock. The gray rock method is not a tactic of aggression, but a practice of radical indifference. It is a strategic withdrawal of the self from a game that is rigged against you. To understand why this is so effective, we must first look into the shadow of the narcissist. Why is a person so desperate for a reaction? Why does silence feel like an assault to them? It is because, in the silence, they are forced to confront their own internal emptiness. Most people do not behave this way because they are evil. They do it because they are terrified of being truly seen for who they are. A person who feels small, powerless, and disconnected. They project a grand image to hide a hollow core. When you provide them with high-intensity emotions, you help them maintain the illusion that they are the center of the universe. You become the mirror that reflects the version of themselves they want to see. But when that mirror turns dull, when it stops reflecting anything at all, the narcissist loses their orientation. They begin to starve. We often imagine that strength is found in the roar, in the defiant stand, or in the clever retort. Robert Greene reminds us that in the realm of power, your reputation and your presence are your greatest assets. But the Stoics teach us that true sovereignty is found in what we refuse to give away. When you engage in a battle of words with a narcissist, you are handing them the keys to your emotional kingdom. You are telling them exactly where your boundaries are, by letting them see where you bleed. The gray rock method is the art of becoming invisible, while standing right in front of them. It is the decision to be intentionally boring. You offer short, non-committal answers. You speak of the weather, of the mundane, of things that hold no emotional weight. You remove the salt, the spice, and the heat from every interaction. You become a psychological void, a place where their projections find no purchase and their provocations find no home. This process requires a level of self-mastery that feels almost superhuman at first. When someone insults your character, your natural instinct is to defend it. When someone lies about you, your instinct is to correct the record. But you must realize that the narcissist is not interested in the truth. They are interested in the transaction. If you give them a truth that is wrapped in anger, they have won the transaction. They don't care about being right. They care about being felt. By choosing to be a gray rock, you are making the conscious choice to be unfeelable. You are declining the invitation to the dance. It is a quiet, cold form of power. It is the power of the mountain that does not care if the wind blows against it. The wind may howl. It may scream. It may try to tear the trees from the slopes. But the mountain remains. It does not argue with the wind. It simply exists. As you begin to implement this indifference, you will likely see a phenomenon known as an extinction burst. When a person who is used to getting a reaction suddenly finds the well is dry, they do not walk away quietly. They increase the pressure. They will poke at your oldest wounds. They will find the things you are most sensitive about and use them as leverage. This is a critical moment. It is the test of your sovereignty. Many people fail here because they mistake this increased aggression for a sign that the gray rock method isn't working. In reality, it is a sign that it is working perfectly. The narcissist is panicking because their source of supply is vanishing. They are like a person drowning, reaching out to grab anything that might keep them afloat. If you can remain calm, if you can stay boring, if you can refuse to be moved by their escalating drama, they will eventually look elsewhere. A fire cannot burn without oxygen, and a narcissist cannot sustain their persona without an emotional response. However, we must turn the mirror toward ourselves. We must ask a difficult question. Why do we find it so hard to be indifferent? Why does the urge to fight back, to explain ourselves, or to win burn so brightly within us? To truly master human nature, we must recognize that a part of this drama lives within our own shadow. We often attract, or are attracted to, these high-conflict personalities because they offer us a distorted sense of purpose. Perhaps you have a savior complex, believing that if you just love them enough or explain things clearly enough, they will finally change. Perhaps you have a deep-seated fear of being misunderstood, which makes you a prisoner to anyone who chooses to misinterpret you. Or perhaps, on a level you haven't yet admitted to yourself, you are addicted to the intensity of the conflict. It makes life feel high stakes. It makes your role in the story feel vital. The reason we struggle to become the gray rock is because the gray rock has no ego. To be boring to a narcissist, you must be willing to let them win the social interaction in the short term. You must be willing to let them think they have outsmarted you or that you are beneath their notice. For many of us, our pride cannot handle that. Our ego demands that we be seen as intelligent, as strong, and as righteous. But the strategist knows that pride is a vulnerability. If your enemy can use your pride to provoke you into a reaction, they own you. True sovereignty is the ability to be perceived as weak while maintaining an internal fortress of strength. It is the clarity of knowing who you are so deeply that you no longer need to prove it. To someone who is committed to not seeing you, we must also look at the concept of selective trust. The goal of understanding human nature is not to build a wall between yourself and the rest of the world. A person who trusts no one is just as much a prisoner as a person who trusts everyone. The goal is to build a gate. You must learn to observe the patterns of behavior in others before you grant them entry to your inner sanctum. A narcissist reveals themselves through their inability to handle your boundaries and their constant need for emotional escalation. Once you identify this pattern, the gray rock method becomes your gatekeeper. It is how you protect your peace. While you decide whether this person has earned a place in your life, this path is not about cruelty. It is important to remember that the narcissist is a human being, however fragmented they may be. They are often the products of their own unhealed trauma, repeating patterns they learned long ago to survive. But understanding their pain does not mean you must become a sacrifice to it. You can have compassion for a storm while still seeking shelter from it. You can recognize the tragedy of their existence without allowing them to turn your life into a tragedy of your own. Indifference is actually a form of mercy for both of you. It stops the cycle of abuse. It prevents you from becoming a version of yourself that you don't recognize. When you stop fighting, you stop providing them with the very thing that keeps them trapped in their own delusions. As you move through this process, you will find that the real work isn't about changing the other person. It is about changing your relationship with your own emotions. It is about reaching a state where your sense of self is not dependent on the approval or the opinion of an unstable actor. This is the essence of Stoicism: to distinguish between what is in your control and what is not. You cannot control the narcissist's words, their lies, or their desperate need for attention, but you can control your pulse. You can control your breath. You can control whether or not you pick up the phone. You can control whether or not you give them the satisfaction of seeing you bleed. There is a profound silence that comes when you finally stop trying to be heard by someone who is deaf to anything but their own needs. It is a silence that might feel lonely at first, but it is the fertile soil in which your true power grows. In this silence, you begin to reclaim the energy you've been leaking into these fruitless battles. You begin to realize that you have been living your life in response to them, rather than in pursuit of your own soul's calling. The gray rock method is the first step toward that reclamation. It is the moment you decide that your peace is more important than your point. True strength is not domination. It is not about crushing an opponent or proving your superiority. It is self-mastery. It is the ability to remain centered in the midst of a whirlwind. When you become the gray rock, you are not being passive. You are being profoundly active in your own defense. You are choosing to preserve your light for those who deserve to see it. And for yourself, you are learning that you do not owe everyone a seat at the table of your life. Some people are only meant to be observed from a distance, their patterns noted, their lessons integrated, and their influence neutralized by your own calm indifference. As you conclude this chapter of your journey, let the darkness of the conflict fade and the wisdom of discernment take its place. Do not walk away with bitterness, for bitterness is just another form of emotional supply that keeps you tethered to the past. Walk away with clarity, You have seen a side of human nature that is difficult to face. But in doing so, you have looked into the depths and survived. You have learned that the most powerful thing you can be in the face of chaos is still. You don't need to isolate yourself from the world. You simply need to learn who deserves your energy and who is merely an echo in the void. You are the architect of your own inner world. Build it with intention, guard it with wisdom, and remember that the greatest victory you can ever achieve over a person who seeks to control you is to be so completely yourself that they no longer have a role to play in your story. You are free not because the world has become kinder, but because you have become more sovereign. You have learned the art of the gate, the strength of the mountain, and the wisdom of the silence. Carry this with you. The theater continues, and the masks will always be there. But you are no longer a character in someone else's play. You are the observer, the strategist, and finally, the master of your own peace.